If we don't get this recording right, we lose the deal. Joe Jackson said it in the car on the way to Steeltown Records. Not to scare his sons, to prepare them. Gordon Keith, the owner of Steeltown Records, had taken a chance on the Jackson 5. He'd paid for studio time, arranged for professional musicians, set up distribution. But this was it, one shot. If the recording wasn't good enough, if the single didn't sell, there wouldn't be a second chance. 8-year-old Michael sat in the back seat feeling sick to his stomach. Everything was riding on his performance, his voice, his ability to do in a professional studio what he did in their garage. "What if I mess up?" Michael whispered to his mother. "You won't mess up, baby. But what if I do? What if my voice sounds different in the studio? What if I can't do it?" Catherine squeezed his hand. "You're going to do what you always do. You're going to sing from your heart, and it's going to be beautiful." But Michael wasn't convinced. He'd heard the stories. Professional recording was different, harder. The microphones picked up every tiny mistake. What if he wasn't ready? What if 8 years old was too young for professional recording? What Michael didn't know was that in 3 hours, a recording engineer with 15 years of experience was going to play back his first take and say something he'd never said before. "I've never heard anything like this from a first take. Not from anyone, and definitely not from a child." March 23, 1968, Gary, Indiana. Steeltown Records wasn't impressive from the outside. It was a small building on the edge of downtown, sandwiched between a hardware store and a laundromat. But inside, it was a real recording studio. Soundproof walls, professional mixing board, the same kind of equipment that Motown used in Detroit. Gordon Keith had built it himself over the course of 3 years. He was a local businessman who loved music and saw potential in Gary's talented musicians. He'd recorded gospel groups, R&B artists, even a polka band once, but he'd never recorded children before. When Joe Jackson had approached him 6 months earlier about recording the Jackson 5, Gordon had been skeptical. "Kids?" Gordon had said. "I don't know, Joe. Kid groups are cute, but they don't sell records." "These kids are different," Joe insisted. "Give us 1 session. If you don't like what you hear, I'll pay for the studio time myself." Gordon had agreed, mostly because he liked Joe's determination, and because the Jackson 5 had a decent reputation in the local club scene. Now, on this Saturday morning in March, Gordon was about to find out if his gamble would pay off. The Jackson 5 arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. Joe believed in punctuality. The boys piled out of the van in their matching outfits. Catherine had stayed up late the night before making sure they looked professional. Jackie was 14, Tito was 13, Jermaine was 12, Marlon was 10, and Michael, the youngest at 8, looked tiny next to his brothers. "You ready for this?" Gordon asked, shaking Joe's hand. "We're ready," Joe said with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. The recording engineer, Don Davis, had been setting up equipment since 7 a.m. He'd worked with Gordon on dozens of sessions and knew how to get good sound out of the modest studio. But when he saw the Jackson boys file in, he couldn't hide his skepticism. "They're so young," Don whispered to Gordon. "You sure about this?" "Joe says they're good. Let's give them a shot." Don nodded, but he'd already mentally prepared himself for a long, frustrating day. Recording with inexperienced artists was always challenging. Recording with children? That was a nightmare waiting to happen. "All right, boys," Don said, trying to sound encouraging. "Who's singing lead?" Michael raised his hand hesitantly. Don looked at him. 8 years old, barely 4 feet tall, shy-looking. "Have you ever recorded in a studio before?" "No, sir," Michael said quietly. Don sighed internally. This was going to be even harder than he thought. "Okay, here's how this works. Recording is different from performing live. The microphone picks up everything, every breath, every tiny mistake. So we're going to do a lot of takes, maybe 10, maybe 20. We keep going until we get it right. Don't get discouraged if the first few don't sound good. That's completely normal. Michael nodded, his stomach churning with anxiety. Joe put his hand on Michael's shoulder. You know the song, boy. Just sing it like you've been singing it, but Michael could hear what his father wasn't saying. You better not mess this up. The song was called Big Boy. It was an up-tempo R&B number that Gordon had written specifically for the group. Simple chord progression, catchy hook. The kind of song that could work on local radio if the performance was good enough. Don set up the microphones. He had the Jackson brothers stand in a semicircle for the backup vocals. Michael stood alone at the lead mic. Let's do a sound check first, Don said. Michael, just sing a few lines so I can set your levels. Michael sang softly, his voice barely above a whisper. You're going to need to sing louder than that, son. Really project, like you're trying to reach the back of a theater. Michael tried again, louder this time. Don adjusted some knobs on the mixing board. Okay, that's better. When we record, I want you to sing at that volume. Can you do that? Yes, sir. All right, let's do a full run-through. This won't be the real take. This is just to make sure everyone knows their parts and the timing is right. The backing track started. Simple drums, bass, a little guitar, the foundation that the vocals would build on. Michael's brothers came in with their harmonies, tight, professional. They'd rehearsed this hundreds of times. Then Michael's cue came. He opened his mouth to sing, and nothing came out. His throat had closed up. The anxiety had taken over. 8 years old, standing in a professional recording studio, with everything riding on his performance, and Michael couldn't make a sound. Don stopped the tape. It's okay, Michael. That happens. Let's try again. In the control room, Gordon and Joe exchanged worried looks. Catherine, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, stood up. Can I talk to him for a minute? Don nodded. Sure, take your time. Catherine walked into the recording booth and knelt down next to Michael. His eyes were wet with tears he was trying to hold back. I can't do it, Mama, he whispered. I'm too scared. What are you scared of, baby? What if I'm not good enough? What if I mess up and we lose everything? Daddy will be so mad. Everyone will be disappointed. Catherine took Michael's face in her hands. Listen to me. You know why your daddy brought you here? Why Gordon is giving us this chance? Michael shook his head. Because you're special, Michael. Not because you're perfect, because you have something that most people don't have. You have a gift, and when you sing, you make people feel things. But what if I mess up in the studio? What if it's different than singing at home? Then you mess up and we try again. Baby, do you think I'd let your daddy bring you here if I didn't believe you could do this? No, Mama. That's right. Now, I want you to forget about the microphone, forget about the engineer, forget about everything except the song. Close your eyes if you need to. Just sing it like you sing it for me at home. Like it's just you and me in the kitchen, and you're singing while I make dinner. Can you do that? Michael nodded. Catherine kissed his forehead and walked back to the control room. Don started the tape again. The backing track rolled. The brothers' harmonies came in. Michael closed his eyes, just like his mother had suggested, and he sang. This time, the sound that came out was completely different from the tentative sound check. This was confident, powerful, emotional. Michael's voice filled the studio with a clarity and control that made Don sit up straighter at the mixing board. The first verse was perfect. Every note hit exactly where it needed to be. The timing was flawless. The emotion was real. The chorus came, and Michael's voice soared. His brothers' harmonies locked in behind him, creating a wall of sound that was tight and professional. Second verse. Michael was in the zone now. His eyes were still closed, but his body was moving slightly to the rhythm. He wasn't just singing the words. He was living them. The bridge required Michael to hit a higher register. Don had been worried about this part. It was where most kid singers struggled. Michael nailed it. The note was pure, sustained, perfect. Final chorus. Michael gave it everything. The energy was building, building to the finish. And then it was over. The last note hung in the air. Don pressed stop on the tape machine. The studio was silent. "That's a good scratch vocal," Don said automatically, falling back on professional habit. "We'll use that to identify any problems, and then we'll do it again for real." But Gordon held up his hand. "Wait. Play that back." "It's just the first take," Don said. "We should play it back, Don." Don sighed and rewound the tape. He pressed play, expecting to hear what he always heard on first takes. Good bones, but plenty of issues to fix in subsequent recordings. The playback started, and Don Davis's expression slowly changed. Because what came through those studio monitors was impossible. The tone was perfect. The pitch was dead on throughout. The emotional delivery was exactly right, building where it needed to build, pulling back where it needed to pull back. There were no mistakes, no flat notes, no timing issues, no moments where Michael's voice got tired or lost focus. It was, in every technical and artistic sense, a perfect vocal performance. From an 8-year-old, on his first professional recording, on his first take. Don had been recording artists for 15 years. He'd worked with seasoned professionals who needed 20 takes to get a vocal this clean, and Michael Jackson had done it once. Don slowly removed his headphones and turned to look at Gordon. "That's impossible," Don said quietly. "But we just heard it," Gordon replied. "No, you don't understand. Adults can't do what he just did. Professional singers with years of experience can't walk into a studio cold and nail a lead vocal on the first take. The microphone picks up everything, every tiny mistake, every moment of uncertainty. And there are none. None." Don turned to look through the studio glass at Michael, who stood at the microphone looking worried. "Did I mess up?" Michael asked into the talkback. Don pressed the button to respond. "Mess up? Son, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've recorded gospel legends, blues masters, and I've never heard anyone nail a lead vocal on the first take like that." Michael's eyes widened. "So it was okay?" "Okay? Michael, what you just did is what professionals spend their entire careers trying to achieve. Most singers need 10 takes. You did it once." In the recording booth, Michael's brothers were staring at him with a mixture of pride and disbelief. "Can I hear it?" Michael asked shyly. Don played it back through the studio monitors so everyone could hear. As the recording played, Michael's expression changed from anxiety to wonder. That was him. That was his voice. And it sounded good. Really good. When it finished, Gordon stood up and walked into the recording booth. "Michael, how old are you?" "8, sir." Gordon shook his head. 8 years old. "Joe, do you understand what you have here? This isn't just a talented kid. This is someone who records like he's been doing it for 20 years. Joe's expression was complicated. Pride mixed with vindication, mixed with something like awe. "So we're keeping that take?" Joe asked. "Keeping it?" Gordon laughed. "That's going to be the master. We're not touching it. You can't improve on perfect." They recorded the rest of the song, the brothers' harmonies, some additional background vocals. But Michael's lead vocal stayed exactly as it was from that first take. When the session ended, Don pulled Gordon aside. "We just recorded something special," Don said. "That kid is going to be famous. Not local famous, real famous." "You think so?" "I know so. Because I've worked with hundreds of artists, and I've never seen anyone with that level of natural ability. Most great singers have to learn how to record, how to work with a microphone, how to sustain energy across multiple takes. Michael just walked in and knew how to do all of it instinctively. Gordon looked at Michael, who was laughing with his brothers. Just a normal 8-year-old kid. Should we tell Motown about him? Don asked. Not yet, Gordon said. Let's get this single out first. Build some buzz. Then, when Motown comes calling, and they will come calling, we'll have leverage. Gordon was right. Big Boy was released in January 1968 and became a regional hit. By summer, Motown had heard about the Jackson 5. And the rest, as they say, is history. Years later, in a 1995 interview, Michael was asked about his first professional recording session. I was terrified, Michael admitted. I thought I was going to mess up and ruin everything for my family. My brothers, my father, had invested everything in us making it. But you nailed it on the first take, Michael smiled. I didn't know that was unusual. I thought everyone recorded that way. It wasn't until years later that engineers would tell me stories about other artists needing 20, 30 takes. I never needed that many. I'd hear the song in my head exactly how it should sound, and then I'd just do it. Did that ever change? As you got more famous, more experienced? No. If anything, I got more particular about first takes. Because first takes have something that later takes don't: spontaneity, emotion. You can hear someone thinking on the 20th take. On the first take, you hear someone feeling. That's what I tried to capture my whole career. So all those hit songs, Billie Jean, Thriller, Man in the Mirror, those were first takes? Many of them, yeah, or second takes at most. Because for me, recording was like capturing lightning. You couldn't manufacture it. You had to let it happen naturally. Don Davis retired from engineering in 1992, but he kept one thing from his decades-long career: a reel-to-reel tape. The master of Big Boy, the first professional recording Michael Jackson ever made. People ask me about all the famous artists I've worked with, Don would say, and I've worked with some legends. But that tape, that's my most prized possession, because it's proof that I was there the day an 8-year-old boy walked into a studio and did something that professionals couldn't do. The day I realized I was witnessing something that only comes along once in a lifetime. Did you know he'd become the biggest star in the world? Don would smile. After hearing that first take? Yeah, I knew. Anyone with ears knew. Michael Jackson didn't become great. He walked into that studio already great. The world just needed time to catch up. March 23, 1968 lasted only 3 hours. But in those 3 hours, 8-year-old Michael Jackson proved something that would define his entire career. That talent isn't just about practice and training. It's about instinct, about knowing what's right before you're told, about having a gift so natural that you can't separate it from breathing. Michael walked into that studio terrified he'd fail. He left having created something perfect on his first try. And he set a standard that would follow him for the rest of his life. Because once you've proven you can do the impossible, people expect you to keep doing it. And Michael Jackson never disappointed.